Hi, I'm Claire and this is my summer reading wrap-up, which is for July and August of 2016. Now, I didn't film one of these at the end of July, beginning of August, because life was kind of hectic with my enormous Harry Potter project as well as 9 Worlds coming up, so that's why you're getting 2 months worth of reading now. I read 8 books in July and 5 in August, which is a lot, so better get started. At the end of June, I was still in the throes of my big Harry Potter reread project, so the first 3 books that I read in July were Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. I'm not going to go into detail about those at all right now because, as evidenced by all of my Harry Potter reread videos, I can talk about it for quite some time. Video reviews for these are, in fact, still coming up. I have not stopped making them, it's just that it takes me about an hour and a half to film one of them, and that's with them being more extensively scripted than anything else that I make, and then they take a long time to edit. Of course, we can't talk about my rereading Harry Potter without talking about the book that was the reason behind it all, Cursed Child, the script from the play. I'm not going to talk about Harry Potter and the Cursed Child anymore because I have a full video on it and you can go and watch it. I'm going to put it on the book right now. It's a spoiler-free review of the script and the play, which I was lucky enough to go and see. Honestly, I have talked about this book so much in the past month or so, both in person and on the internet, and I kind of can't anymore. I need to take a Harry Potter break before Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, when I will, I'm sure, resume the ranting. And now for non-Harry Potter things that I read in July. First, I listened to the audiobook of Stiff by Mary Roach. This is a non-fiction book about cadavers and corpses and what happens to human bodies after death. And I expected it to be kind of gruesome but really interesting, and it was. But it also had this really interesting depth to it. It wasn't just about the physicality of bodies after death. It had a lot to do about how our dead bodies have been treated by doctors, physicians, researchers from the depth of history up until now. She talks to a lot of doctors and medical students about the morals and ethics of using dead human bodies in medical research and what kind of advances have been made from that use in medical research. And she also talks to them about their philosophical, religious attitudes to it and how they reconcile the fact that they have to use the bodies of dead people for research and the fact that medicine exists to save people and they don't want to have to use bodies in I don't know, disrespectful ways or anything like that. It was very, very interesting, but it was also quite funny because Mary Roach has a really hilarious writing style. I guess if you're very squeamish, it's probably not the book for you, but I thought it was a pretty cool book despite the fact that it does have slightly gross bits in it. And finally, in July, I read 3 volumes of comic books. First, I read Giant Days Volume 2 by John Allison, Lisa Treyman, and Max Sarin. A really sweet contemporary comic about 3 girls at university who are friends and who are just trying to navigate life, relationships, exams. I just really enjoy this comic a lot. It makes me happy. Overall, I think I liked this volume a little bit more than the first one, even though the tone remains the same and I'm getting the same enjoyment out of it. I thought that the plot for this one was a little bit better. Maybe it's just that the first one was a lot of establishing characters and situations and this one has a bit more stuff going on. And as ever, I really enjoy the art style in this. It's very cartoony and cute and I really like it. I would definitely recommend this one. Next, I've got Run, Love, Kill Volume 1 by John Tsue, Eric Kanete, and Leonardo Olea, and this one I picked just because of the art. It's got this black background to the panels, which I think is really interesting, and I just really quite like the style of it. It's very colourful and it's very pretty, even though there is a lot of fighting in this book, and that's actually my main complaint about it. I just didn't feel like a lot happened in this first book. The story is set in a city which we understand to have a somewhat oppressive regime. There is a lot of surveillance going on. You can't really go in and out of the city at will. And our protagonist is a young woman who is trying to escape the city. She's making plans to go. And our protagonist is a young woman who is trying to escape this city. She is making plans to get out of Dodge as fast as she can, but her plans are thwarted somehow, and she is pursued by a bunch of mercenaries or the army, some bad guys with guns who want to arrest her. But her plans of having one night of partying before leaving the city forever are thwarted when she is tracked down to the club where she is seeing some friends, I guess, by a bunch of... But her plans of saying goodbye to her friends and partying one last time in this club in the city before she leaves forever are... But her plans for her last day in the city to go and see some friends and party a little bit are thwarted when some bad guys with big guns catch up with her and there's a lot of fighting. I just didn't feel like there was an actual arc that worked for this book. I feel like there should be maybe one more issue of the comic packaged in this volume, because I didn't really feel like we reached any kind of conclusion. And finally, in July, I read Siobhan, book 1, Lament of the Lost Moles. This is by Rosinski and Defoe, and this is a book that was sent to me for review by Cine Book Limited, who are a comic book publishing company who acquire rights for a lot of French comic books and then translate them into English and sell them in the UK. This is a high fantasy story that's set in this kind of barren landscape ruled by an evil sorcerer, and our main character is Siobhan. She is the daughter of a local lord, and she is mourning the death of her father, watching her mother remarry for political gain, and kind of having weird prophetic dreams, and training with a sword because she's a tomboy. She's also very rebellious and doesn't know when to keep her mouth shut. She's got a bit of an Arya Stark vibe to her, but the setting is a bit more Viking inspired. I liked it. I thought it felt like a very traditional fantasy with a strong female character written by some dudes in the 70s. Moving on to August, the first thing that I read was Imprudence by Gail Carriger. This is the second book in her Custard Protocol series, which is in the same universe as the rest of her books. The Custard Protocol is all about Prudence. She is the daughter of Alexia and Connell McCann, the main couple from the Parasol Protectorate, the first series in the same universe. This is set about 20 years later. She's a young woman. She has a dirigible, which is called the Spotted Custard and looks like a ladybug for reasons. And she's got a crew with her on that airship, which she takes around the world for missions. She went to India in the first book and displeased the queen in the process, and in this one she's off to Egypt to convey her father, Lord McCann, who has to go there for his own safety. Now, I love this universe of steampunk, vampires, werewolves, intrigue that Gail Carriger has created, and I love most of the other books in the series. In fact, the one that I like the least is Prudence, the first book in the Custard Protocol. There were some things in that book that rubbed me the wrong way, and I'm sad to say it does not get better in Imprudence for me. It in fact got worse. I was very, very disappointed in this book. There were parts of it that I really loved that I wished Carriger had explored a little more. The pack dynamics, the things that go on in London before they leave. I had some issues in the first book with the relationship that was being set up between the main character Prudence and the kind of chief engineer Cornell LeFou, who is the son of a character from the first series. It just got worse basically the whole thing felt very predictable, very tropey, and really incredibly sexist. Prudence spends the entire novel saying exactly what she wants out of this relationship, establishing what the rules are going to be, even if they are not something that is, you know, common or usual. She says what she wants, he agrees, and then he whines and is a big baby about how he's not getting exactly what he wants out of this relationship, even though he hasn't said what it is. By the end of the book, Prudence has been told by everybody around her that it was really, really obvious what he wanted out of this relationship, even though he hadn't told her any of it, and she agrees that she wants the same thing, and that's the resolution of the romance. Taking into account the fact that I thought that he was smarmy and cocky and not really romantic in the first place, and also his name literally means a sausage made out of fish puree in French, and he's French, I can't actually take it seriously at all in any way, shape or form. Fish sausage. The next thing that I read though was absolutely perfect, one of my favorite reads of the whole year, and that was Sorcerer to the Crown by Zen Cho. I have a review of this book up on the channel, so I won't talk about it too much, but it's a fantasy of manners. It's just a lovely, lovely book. I really enjoyed it, and I found out recently that Zen Cho is writing a sequel, so I'm super excited about that, and I will most definitely be reading the sequel when it comes out. In August, I was also doing ARC August, where I was trying to get through some of my review copies that I'd been sent by publishers. One of those was Nancy Parker's Diary of Detection by Julia Lee, which was sent to me by the lovely people at Oxford University Press because of my reviews of Robin Stevens' Murder Most and Ladylike series. This is also middle grade mystery. We follow Nancy Parker, a 14-year-old housemaid in the 1920s. She would really prefer to be a detective rather than a housemaid, but then again she gets to go to the coast in Seabourn with her new employer, Mrs. Bryce, so it's not all bad. When they arrive in Seabourn, there are rumors on the square about a thief and things going missing, and Nancy decides that she's going to investigate. But over the course of the story, she also uncovers some bigger mysteries to do with the cook, who may or may not have murdered her previous husbands, and Mrs. Bryce, who may or may not be lying about her previous husbands. It's a really fun story with really delightful characters. The mysteries are a little bit obvious for an adult reader. Nancy's point of view is done through her diary of detection. It's got this kind of like handwriting font, and it's got stains and things like that. I'm probably going to give it away to a friend of mine who has 2 daughters who I think will enjoy it very, very much. I would definitely recommend it if you know any children in the kind of correct age bracket. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for adult readers in the way that I would still recommend Murder Most and Ladylike, but I really enjoyed it. Next, I read False Hearts by Laurel Lamb, and I got an e-copy of this one from NetGalley. This is one of those books I wanted to read as soon as I heard the premise. We follow twins Tama and Tyler, who spent the first 16 years of their lives conjoined because they grew up in a very strict cult that didn't want any medicine. When they escape the cult, they get an operation that saves their lives but also separates them. And they go on living their lives in a very modern, futuristic San Francisco. Fast forward a good number of years and they still both are living in this city, and they're about to meet for dinner when Tyler shows up late, covered in blood, and saying that she did not do it and that there was more to the story than that. Then the cops show up and arrest her for the first civilian murder in decades. And from then on, Tama has to assume her sister's identity in order to prove her innocence by infiltrating this like terrifying mob organization. The entire book is extremely tense, and you have this great combination of fear and anger from Tama, because she is afraid of what will happen to her sister if she can't clear her name, but at the same time she's very angry because Tyler's kept some secrets from her and she's not used to that. It upsets her, but she's also got to get everything under control so that she can be effective when she goes undercover in this really dangerous place. And on the other hand, you've got Tyler in a jail cell giving her own account of the beginning of their lives and how they escaped the cult and why. And that kind of dual narrative I found very, very effective. I really like weird cult stories as well, so it was great to see kind of what was going on there. I would have wanted a bit more about the cult and how they escaped and kind of what happened to them right after they escaped, but I understand that's a different book. But the book itself is really, really fun and I would definitely recommend it, and it does feature a bisexual main character. It's not an important part of the plot, but it's good to see some representation. Finally, I just finished reading Ghost Talkers by Mary Robinette Kowal. This is her latest novel and it is a standalone that is set in World War I. I also got an e-copy of this from NetGalley. We follow the story of Ginger Stuyvesant, an American heiress who works for the British Army during the war in their spirit corps. She is a medium and her job is to talk to the souls of recently deceased soldiers who report in to her to tell her how they died. They do this so that the British military gets the most up-to-date information, and of course it gives them this really great advantage in the war. And the problem is the Germans have just figured out what's going on and they are trying to find where the spirit corps is located so that they can attack them. Ginger knows this because her fiance, Captain Benjamin Harford, is an intelligence officer, so he's heard that the spirit corps where his fiance works is in danger and he comes to warn her, and they kind of etch this plan together to kind of find where the leak is in the British information. From the moment that I read the premise of this book, I knew two things. The first was that I would probably cry, and spoiler alert, I totally did. And the second was that there was a thing that I'm not going to name that was probably going to happen. And I kind of expected the thing to happen at the end of the book, when we're very near the climax and the moment of victory, to have this kind of punch to the feels. But that's not what happened. Instead, the thing happened very early in the book, around the 25% mark. And that was even worse because then you have to go through the entire book with the thing punching you in the feels repeatedly. It was really, really great, but it was also very bittersweet, and at times I could feel my throat constricting when I was reading because it was just very, very tragic. I always love Mary Robinette Kowal's characters, and this was no exception. I really loved Ginger, her dedication to the war effort, her strength, because she has to spend her working day viewing the death of hundreds and hundreds of soldiers, and basically she gets secondhand PTSD from having to live through people's death in order to report on them. All the secondary characters are also really great. There's a lot of diversity in this book, a lot of characters of color, which is historically accurate for World War I. All in all, I'm giving it a slightly lower rating than Glamorous Histories, just because I found it a little bit draining to go through as a reading experience because it made me so upset, but it was the point, and I think if you write a book about World War I and your readers aren't upset, then you're doing it wrong. So that's it. This was my mammoth July and August reading wrap up. I hope I was able to edit this to a decent length because folks, I've been recording for a long time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of the books that I mentioned. If you'd like to see more from me, you can check the sidebar right here for more videos. And if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button for new videos from me every week. I've been Claire, thanks so much for watching, and see you soon.